Hello, and welcome to another of my hip hop discography rankings. Today I'm going to be looking at Mr. Kanye West. So, Mr. West, a very big name in music and popular culture for goods and bads. His name become uh, more synonymous now for his outbursts and various different personality traits than his actual music, which he's still putting out fairly consistently. Um, so, so it's kind of a bit difficult, a lot of the time to look at his collection of music objectively and judge it. But judge it I shall. So, full disclosure, this list will not include Donda because I'm not listening to all that. I mean, I've heard a few of the songs that I think would be the best ones, and they were fine at best. And considering those are, let's say, the what I feel would be the strongest tracks from the album, I don't really feel like going through the other 30 or 40 bloody songs and the deluxe version, all that kind of stuff. And considering a lot of it just appears to be part twos to songs that are already on the album, it feels extremely pointless. And Donda 2, which may or may not have been released by the time this video comes out, isn't going to be released on streaming services anyway, according to Kanye, so I don't have to listen to that anyway, so forget those albums. But I am going to be including his albums with Jay-Z and Kid Cudi and the compilation with Good Music, just because people have often been including them in their lists. Um, and I mean, if you want to see a, um, as a solo discography, then obviously you just look through this and take out the ones, uh, the group ones. Um, so yeah, that means we have 12 projects in total to get through, and we shall begin with number 12, Jesus is King. Now, this was released October 2019 for the Donda projects, and this it's taking more of a gospel approach of an album, so very different in terms of overall content to the rest of his projects. Not that he hasn't looked at Christianity and his own faith in songs before. This is the first project that is going to be dedicated to that. um, so, I mean, there's certainly songs on here which there's Selah and Follow God, which are fairly early on in the album, which aren't that heavy in terms of the Christian influence. There's Christian imagery in the lyrics somewhat, but they're not hugely different to some of Kanye's earlier tracks, so they're decent enough. Use This Gospel, which reunites Clips, is it's great to see them all together again. Apart from them, the album, it kind of goes in and out about how heavy of a Christian record it is, and it doesn't. It's certainly not. For the majority of it, it doesn't feel too preachy. There are moments where it comes off a bit converty, but for the most part, the actual content isn't too heavy hitting. Um, On God is a interesting paradox of a quite a braggadocious track, whilst still keeping the Christian imagery throughout it, putting everything on God. Um, so that's an interesting as I say paradox to have on an album which is so heavily. Uh, no, why does it keep doing that anyway? Um, but yeah, but so all in all, it was okay. I don't want to necessarily knock someone for exploring their faith at all. But there are not a lot on this album that, considering how late it is into Kanye's career, there's nothing that's particularly um, explored that hasn't been in other ways before, and it's probably just a bit too much of a shift in the overall music. But at least with it being a gospel album, it's a clean album, so you don't get Kanye's bad sex lines, which we are going to get to as the albums go on. So yeah, as an overall project, it's fine for what it is. It kind of served its purpose, but yeah, it's not a particularly strong. There's no real songs on there that are that go in one of in any of the strongest echelons of Kanye's discography. So number 11, we are going to have The Life of Pablo. This album, right? So at least Jesus is King was a short album. So while this album is not as long as Donda ended up being, there's still a lot of filler on this album. So this came out February 2016 after a bit of break between official albums. The track listing was reworked, and the songs themselves have kind of been re-edited since they've been officially uploaded and things like that. No version of the album really seems to be, to me, that strong. There's I suppose overrunning theme of the album is supposed to be kind of to lead on into what Jesus is King eventually happened. Sort of looking at the dichotomy of the trying to lead a religious life and the more salacious celebrity life. So there's just a little bit of a gospel influence, particularly early on in the album. Songs such as Father Stretch My Hands, part 1 and 2. But I mean, it's a lot of it's the lyrics which we're going to get to on several of these albums, which lets the album down a lot. It kind of just doesn't really have a lot to. Not he doesn't have a lot to talk about. He certainly does have a lot to talk about, considering how heavy he was in the public eye at this time and the amount of controversies he'd gone through, he's just not very good at dealing with any of these things in a way that make you have any sympathy for him. Yeah, let's not forget Famous, where it's just an excuse to reignite the feud with Taylor Swift, which was just horrible, frankly, and the song itself isn't that good anyway. There's what is it, Freestyle 4, whatever it is, which goes over designer panda track, quite literally pandering. And there's the aforementioned Far Stretch My Hands Part 1, where he mentions the model with the bleached soul, which is always enjoyable. The album does actually pick up towards the second half of it. We get some stronger tracks. There's sort of section towards the end after the interludes, which are kind of supposed to be the bonus tracks of the album, even though they're actually generally stronger than the rest of the album. I mean, No More Parties in LA featuring Kendrick Lamar, which almost single-handedly saves this album. Just, with Kendrick having a absolute monster of a verse, and Kanye's verse after it is, obviously not as strong as Kendrick's, but it's certainly one of the better verses that he has. Even if he does try to ruin it with his obsession of having a particular sex line, usually something to do with blowjobs or swallowing semen, and repeating it over and over again. Even that can't really defeat the verse that he does. And with its Madlib produced kind of soul sample driven beat, really helps the track along as well. We get Wolves slightly earlier on, which has a bit more of an industrial feel to it. Which again, Kanye has a very long, epic outro verse where he tries to ruin it with repeating his sex lines, but still, it's a really, it's still really strong and powerful track overall. The features of Sia and Vic Mensa really help the track as well. Frank Ocean's bit, which is actually saved for the interlude following it, is also strong. It would have been nice to see him make the track as well, but I guess the track is already quite long and epic as it is. Real Friends, which is a bit more of a subtle track, as well as 30 Hours, which has an extended ride out to it. These are definitely a lot stronger than other tracks earlier on in the project. The I Love Kanye interlude is amusing and self-aware, but the whole I Miss the Old Kanye is very apparent throughout the album, just listening to the rest of the songs. There's only a few tracks on here which I can really care about, and I say they're mostly towards the end of the project. So this isn't a good album. It only sort of goes above Jesus the King because the songs that are strong on here are very strong, and that certainly becomes a bit of a recurring theme throughout a lot of the later albums in the discography. So speaking of which, number 10, we have Yay. A very tricky one to look at, because so this was in between Life of Pablo and Jesus King, released June 2018 as part of the kind of sort of series of 7 track albums on Good Music. So, the fact that it's only 7 tracks makes it a lot easier to digest. And the tracks themselves are fairly short as well. The album is over in like just over 20 minutes. Not Which isn't that much shorter than Jesus is King. So, kudos to Kanye for making such a short project, because certainly at that point it didn't feel like you'd be able to carry much of a longer project. And the material itself isn't too bad generally. The I Thought About Killing You intro track, there's a nice sort of dark spoken words, looking at Kanye's darkest feelings of of anger towards people, and sort of looking, somewhat exploring his bipolar, which had recently been diagnosed to him. It's also made reference to on the cover of it. Then the second part of the track just kind of becomes a bit of a braggadocious track, which is fine, but takes away slightly from the sinister nature and frank nature of the opening of it. All Mine is just a generic sex track which doesn't really add much to the project. So before that we have Yikes, which kind of follows on from the first track somewhat. Doesn't delve in too much into say sort of the raw frankness of the intro parts, but it's still a decent enough track. We have we go yes, Ghost Town Part 1, because there's a Ghost Town on the other album that was released at that time, just keep the track of them, which is the strongest overall track on the album, just because of how powerful it is, and it's mostly a vocal track as well, so you don't get a lot of Kanye's middling raps throughout it. This then follows with the closer, Violent Crimes. Again, quite a frank discussion about having daughters, and how things would be for them growing up, the fears of men taking advantage of them, and things like that. So again, interesting to hear Kanye have such a frank discussion about these fears. Um, so there are bits of the project which kind of explore his bipolar nature, which is an interesting thing to explore. There's not a lot on there though that justifies. He kind of, as at one point, I think it's the end of Yikes, kind of uses his bipolar as say it's not a weakness, it's a superpower, which is a good way to sort of look at it, and combat the stigma around that. But there's nothing really on the album that justifies that side of it. You only really see the ugly side of it. There's nothing particularly positive or empowering on the project, which kind of drags it down in terms of exploring the bipolar disorder, which which is a shame because if there was, you know, more of an empowering side to it, it could have been a very strong thing to explore. And for the dark side of it, we get some good stuff, but it would have been nice to have both sides of the coin look explored better. But for the fact that it is a short project, it's quite a minimal project. It's not too grandiose at any points, and the lyrics, for the most part, are pretty tolerable. It's a fine project. It's certainly not his strongest. Have any of his strongest work, but it's fine for what it is, really. So number 9, we have Cruel Summer. Now, I was toying quite a bit about where to put this because it is a compilation, so it shouldn't really be ranked as a proper album. So I'm just trying to look at it for what it achieves as a compilation. So being released in September 2012 as a way of establishing the Good Music label. Several of the artists were about to release projects such as Pusha T, Big Sean, who have quite a heavy role throughout the album, which, considering they were kind of the two premier lyricists on Good Music at the time, is good. So, but there's certainly, considering how stacked the Good Music roster was at that time, apart from Kanye, Sean, and Pusha, no one else on Good Music really gets a big showing. Like Kid Cudi gets a solo track and appears in the chorus of one of the other songs, but considering he was still on Good Music, I believe at that point, doesn't really do a lot. John Legend is hardly on there, and or commonly appears once. And again, all these people were still, as far as I'm aware, part of Good Music, or still very much affiliated with Good Music at least. There's lots of outside appearances throughout the album, starting with R. Kelly appearing with Kanye at the beginning, a great collaboration of artists from Chicago with Bad Sex Lines. And it's nice to see appearances from Jadakiss, Raekwon, Mace. 2 Chainz appears on there literally 3 or 4 times, which is fairly excessive considering he was not on the label. But hey, do you? So really what I'm trying to get is there's not a lot of great posse collaborations on the album. Let's say, considering how many artists and how a large part of a great roster it was at that time. Click is a pretty good posse cut, even though again that's Sean and Kanye and Jay-Z, who wasn't actually is an outside artist, but it's a strong beat which has a nice minimalist feel that goes more frantic as the verses and the chorus go on, and all of them have pretty strong verses. Kanye has his epic closing verse, which is one of the stronger verses that he had around this time. Similarly with New God Flow, which is probably the strongest track overall. Pusha T has a couple of verses at the beginning. very sort of typical Pusha T, coke rap. Then Kanye comes along for again quite an epic third verse. It's, longer than the others. Um, and just throughout the whole track you get this haunting piano with some very hard hitting percussions which come very strong towards the end of Kanye's verse as well to like make it really emphatic. um, this version of the song also has Ghostface appearing at the end, considering one of Ghostface's songs is sampled for the track. It's also sampled on Life of the Number Pies in LA, as far as I remember. Um, but it's good to hear Ghostface with them. I say, considering it's his sample as well. Um, the song works as just Pusha and Kanye. That was the version that was released first. Maybe if both versions of the song were on there, it would have worked better because I say the song works well as just Pusha and Kanye. But yeah, I say this is pretty much the strongest track on the album, so yeah, can't really complain too much about that. But considering they put a remix of Chief Keef's "Don't Like" on there, which cool to get Jadakiss on the album. But "Don't Like" was not a great song in the first place, and there's only so much that Jadakiss, Kanye, Big Sean, and Pusha can do to help it. Sin City is a cool dark track. And say there's a lot of other decent verses and collaborations on there. But considering this is not too long after the Good Friday songs that were released, which were kind of more heavy goods music collaborations by and large, and none of them made this album. It's a bit of a shame, because there was certainly some strong collaborations between the group of them on there that could have made this album a bit better, a bit stronger as a compilation. It's again, it's a decent enough showcase of good music. I mean, Kanye gets most of the spotlight on here, of course. So it would have been nice to get more of the rest of the roster showcased. But it's okay. It's okay overall. There's certainly good tracks on it. There's certainly nothing too bad on there overall. So there's that. Number 8. We have Jesus, released in June 2013. A very polarizing album, and understandably so. There's certainly quite a divide between the strong tracks on here and bad tracks on here. And again, even the good songs quite often fall short of being perfect because of Kanye's lyrical content. I mean, take New Slaves, for example. It's again a really strong, epic track which begins very minimalist and then becomes even more epic and grandiose for its outro, which features Frank Ocean on it as well. But halfway through Kanye's extended verse, he just decides to repeat. Sorry, it's called like the intro to the bridge into the verse. We just repeats one of his blowjob lines, which again, just kind of takes the track down. If it wasn't on the track, it would not have been missed, and the song would have been a lot stronger than it was. But the song itself, you know, I enjoy the good bits of the track, and it's a very strong look at modern day racism, and the view of Kanye and his success at that time. And the tracks before that as well are good enough as well. They're kind of all co-produced with Daft Punk, so they have more of a mixture of feelings in terms of the music. Like Black Skinhead is a very sort of industrial track, and so for that it's got quite a heavy feel to it. Later on the album, we get Guilt Trip, which features Kid Cudi for the outro, who had said that he was underutilized for this track, and that's very true, because he's pretty much the best thing about the track. It's just having his very clean outro to the track, which just kind of takes a reggae sample and tones it down for a lot of the track, but it's a strong outro. Bounds to the outro track kind of goes back to Kanye's more soul sampling kind of style. It's a dedication to his wife at the time, Kim Kardashian, with Charlie Wilson on chorus, which is always nice to hear. But those are kind of the strongest elements of the track. The beat and Charlie Wilson. Again, Kanye doesn't do a lot on the track that is that impressive. Blood on the Leaves, which takes the Nina Simone sample from Strange Fruit, one of the greatest songs of all time. Just of the Nina Simone cover, I should say, was the original Billie Holiday. Taking that sample and making it into quite a southern kind of trappy influence track about a relationship gone awry, which just shouldn't work, but just about does on the way that Kanye is able to do it. Again, some of the lyrics don't necessarily work on the track, but kudos to him for pretty much being able to hold this together and make a concept that works. And any song that hasn't been mentioned, because it's quite a short album as well, it only being 10 tracks, also makes it a lot easier to get through and kind of sift out the good from the bad. The other tracks, Send It Up, Can't Hold My Liquor with Chief Keef on there, and the the other track of it, that half of the album. There's not really a lot to say about them. I mean, other than just an excuse to get Keith Chief on the album again. Kanye just doesn't really do anything to make these tracks that worthwhile. So I mean, there's strong tracks on here definitely, but this is really getting to the point where Kanye lyrically wasn't doing a lot. I mean, sonically the album is good throughout. apart from say a few tracks which don't really hit that well. Um, but the lyrically it's not great. Um, so yeah, I appreciate the more minimalist approach to the album after having quite grandiose projects before, which we'll get to soon. Um, and a lot of the initial feeling of the album worked quite well, but yeah, a lot of it wears off fairly soon after repeat listens. Um, but yeah, some strong tracks on there, and some very bad songs on there. So, next up, we have. Let's see where we are on here again. Yes, that works, yeah. So, number 7. And I think I may end after this one because we're about halfway through the discography, and the video keeps getting quite shuttery for some reason. I have to look at that. But anyway, we are going to look at My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and I actually have this one, and this is quite cool with this one because I'm sure you're all used to seeing that cover for it. This is the for the physical version. There's different covers that you can use for it. So go there. I tend to go for. I think this is the best of the covers, so I tend to keep this one in for the front. So there you go, fitting like that. Yeah, I think that's the strongest cover for it. So I like that to stay in. So yeah, released at the November 2010. After a bit of time away following some controversy, namely with Taylor Swift. So this is kind of a bit of a comeback for him in a sense, and certainly quite a grandiose project overall. Several of the tracks have quite extended bits to them, extended outros and whatnot. And while it's very commendable to hear Kanye with such epic scale to his album, and has been quite good at doing epic for his tracks, it's again, there's not a lot that Kanye actually says on the album that particularly resonates. Again, a bit of a sort of theme, I suppose. It's supposed to be just like just looking at Kanye's life and just his celebrity status, and looking at it as like exploring the dark and twisted sides of him and all the fantastical elements. So we begin with dark fantasy. A nice dark intro, but with kind of an epic chorus to it as well, which really sets the album off strong, with help with production from RZA and No ID. There's also around the time that Kanye started adding lots of producers to all of his songs, which hasn't necessarily helped, particularly with the later projects. Just put that out there, but yeah, this song works well. The following track, Gorgeous, with Kid Cudi and Raekwon, a great collaboration between them. A nice smoothish track with Kanye having a bit of a discussion, about people's perceptions of him, which sort of kind of continues into the very majestic, power. When this is word powerful for the track Power, which comes straight after this as a kind of like the lead single. All the Lights is a nice, grandiose track featuring several vocalists throughout. Perhaps too many, as you can't. There's not a lot of Rihanna's quite distinctive throughout the track. Kid Cudi has a featured bit, as does Fergie. All the other featured artists don't really play too much of parts themselves. So maybe begs the question of having too many people on just for the sake of having them on. But the song itself, again, very powerful, and strong, hard hitting. Even if what Kanye's saying doesn't really make that much sense, talking about separating from a partner and being able to take care of his daughter. He didn't have any children at this point. So I think just more just of a character exploration rather than actually looking at Kanye himself. But still a very powerful track overall. Monster with Rick Ross at the beginning for reasons. Jay-Z, Nicki Minaj, and Justin Vernon from Bon Iver. The verses themselves are a bit up and down, but overall, so strong collaboration. I'd say apart from the opening bit of Rick Ross, which is not really doesn't really serve any purpose to the track. Everyone holds their own on the song. It's looking at kind of like the darker, again looking at the darker side of success, or in Nicki Minaj's case, rising success. I'm not the hugest Nicki Minaj fan, but this is kind of one of us. I wouldn't necessarily say that she dominates this song as a lot of people do, but she does have a decent enough verse on here. I feel it's only one of her stronger verses when you look at everything she's put out. So Appalled, it kind of continues the dark success side of things. Jay-Z appears again alongside Pusha T, Sahai the Prince, RZA and Swiss Beats have appeared for vocal backups. Again, a bit more so than Monster, perhaps the verses are a bit stronger throughout here and kind of look a bit more at, again, the dark side of fame. But yeah, I mean, it's where we start. The outro kind of goes on, it kind of drags on a little bit, which is kind of around the point of the album where the outros do start dragging. I presume just a way to try and make the songs feel more epic, with middling results. Devil in a New Dress, featuring Rick Ross again, produced by Bink or Mike Dean, depending on who you ask. a nice sort of return to the more soulful sounds of Kanye. That kind of early Rockefeller sound, hence Bink's involvement. Um, yeah, the verses themselves aren't necessarily that strong. I mean, Rick Ross does at least kind of sound a bit more forceful, uh, aggressive on what's as the verse picks up. But apart from that, the verses aren't that interesting. Even though the beat itself is very lush. Has a nice guitar bit between Kanye's and Rick Ross's bit. Um, the version that was originally released just ended after Kanye's bits. Um, so again, just maybe a bit of an extended for the sake of extending. Um, because I mean, yeah, the song itself, the beat is stronger than the actual content of the song. Um, Runaway, which is a good song. Pusha T has a great verse on there. Kanye sounds great on the track. Half the song is an extended outro with Kanye using some auto tune to mask his vocals to try and play with that effect, which just is it's not necessary. The song was fine as it was. You only needed the first half of the song. The rest of it just doesn't add to it at all. And yeah, this is quite an egregious example of just going way too far with extending the songs, which is kind of what apart other than some of the lyrical content kind of brings the album down, just the unnecessary extending of the tracks. Um, After that, we have Hell of a Life, sampling Black Sabbath's Iron Man, which helps keep the song catchy. Nothing, in terms of Kanye's lyrics, kind of, looking um, at this like sexual, sensual side of things. Relationships with porn stars, meeting them in uh, clubs and dance floors, and just the excess of breaking up not long after meeting, and just relationships not lasting and that kind of thing. It doesn't necessarily carry throughout the track, but the song itself is catchy, largely helped by its sample, and just having quite heavy rock sounding feel to it. Then Blame Game with John Legend. John Legend sounds really good as per usual, with nice piano sound throughout as well. Kanye's bits just have a lot of him again experimenting with how his vocals sound, using different effects for different lines throughout his verses, which just it gets so excessive. It just doesn't. It's just not warranted at any point. It does not help. I don't know if it's a way of exploring the fractured nature of relationships, or it's just Kanye deciding to do it because he wanted to do it. But it just doesn't really help the song at all. And anytime John Legend's not on the song, you're kind of waiting for him to come back. Then again, a bit of an extended outro of Kanye, which then bridges into skits with Chris Rock, which is amusing. Chris Rock is funny. He kind of makes the material funnier than it should really have any right to be. Um, but it doesn't necessarily add to the song at all. But I mean, if fine for keeping it. I was gonna say that Chris Rock was stronger on the song than Kanye was. Um, we then get Lost in the World for the grand closing track. Um, largely vocal on here. Kanye just has a verse in the middle, about like 24 bars or something. Um, One of his stronger performances. At least he kind of ends the album with a strong a strong verse. Um, and yeah, the beat itself has a bit of a kind of a tribal feel in parts of it, and yeah, a bit more, I guess, like a worldly feel to it. So kind of end the album on a high, with then bridging into the "Who Can Survive in America," Survive in America skit with Gil Scott Heron, which is always good to hear Gil Scott Heron on the track. I don't know whether how much his part helps the content of the album, or what's happened previously on the album. But yeah, again, it's a nice way to end the album. Gil Scott Heron has always got some great lines, and just it's kind of nice to hear it ending with his voice rather than Kanye's by that point in the album. So yeah, okay, it's album has been really difficult for me because there are some really really strong bits on the album, but yeah, there's just a lot that really is unnecessary, and this is kind of really around like the time that Kanye's style was just changing too much from his original. I get the growth of doing very um, epic songs whilst being quite dark throughout is really intriguing, but just there's just too much on here which wasn't needed for the album. Again, some of the Good Friday tracks that were released before this project could have been suitable on the album, particularly if you look at the Runaway film, which comes with the album, which uses songs from the album to kind of like narrate a story about Kanye meeting an angel who falls from Earth, and I mean, if you looked at that kind of like running thread and was able to put that through the album, it might make it a bit more cohesive. I suppose the idea of it being was like mixed up of beautiful, dark, twisted. It's supposed to be a mixture of contradictions, and so therefore lacking cohesion. Just in the fact of it just being a juxtaposition of different feelings and emotions. But even just trying to think about that makes my head hurt. Yeah, it is an epic album, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great album. It's a good album. It's certainly not one of his classic albums. So there's material before this was just stronger, and the only thing that really keeps it away from a lot of the later projects is that at least the music was still sonically fairly consistent with what he'd been working on and perfecting at that time. But yeah, I've rambled on about that far too much. I will have to try and bring my thoughts down and get ready to do part two with the second half of the discography. So I will see you all for that soon.